The room was silent, so silent that you could almost hear the tick of the old grandfather clock echoing across the lawyer's office. Then it happened, the words that seared through my chest like a hot blade. "You are a nobody," sneered Monica, my ex-husband's new wife, her voice dripping with venom as she leaned forward in her designer gown, her manicured nails tapping the mahogany table like a judge delivering a sentence. My heart pounded, not because of her insult, but because of the smug confidence in her eyes. She believed she had already won, that her grip on the wealth and legacy of my late ex-husband was sealed. The other relatives shifted in their seats, their eyes darting between us, waiting for my reaction. But I didn't flinch. I only sat back quietly, my lips pressed together, because I knew something Monica did not. Hello, beautiful people. You made it here for a reason, so don't stop now. Hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to see how far this story of revenge will travel. You see, America has a way of magnifying shame. To be called a nobody in front of lawyers, children, family friends, and even the housemaid who had come to witness the will, it wasn't just an insult. It was a dagger aimed at my dignity. Monica threw her words with the confidence of a woman who thought the papers were stacked in her favor, that all the years I had spent building a life with David, my ex-husband, had been erased the moment she stepped into his mansion. "David chose me over you," she said again, tilting her chin in triumph, "and now his entire estate will prove it." A few people chuckled nervously. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses, trying to maintain order. I kept my eyes on Monica, memorizing her arrogance, her self-assurance, her blind belief in her victory. Monica had always been the storm that swept into my peaceful home and turned it upside down. Back when David and I were still together, she was the shadow that slithered in through his office, the temptation that whispered sweet lies to a man already drowning in the illusion of success. And when he left me for her, it wasn't just a marriage that was broken. It was an empire. Years of sacrifice, tears, and sweat, gone in an instant, handed over to a woman who had done nothing but smile at the right moment. But even as she mocked me in that lawyer's office, she had no idea that storms don't last forever. "Ladies, please," the lawyer finally interjected, his voice tight. "We must maintain some dignity here." But Monica wasn't finished. She leaned closer to me, her perfume strong, her eyes gleaming like daggers. "Dignity? What does she know about dignity?" She jabbed a finger in my direction. She begged David to stay with her, and still he left. She begged for money, and still he cut her off. "She's nothing but a leftover, unwanted, discarded." Gasps filled the room. Even David's younger brother coughed uncomfortably. My daughter shifted uneasily in her seat, her fists clenched at her sides. But I sat still, because sometimes silence is the loudest thunder. Monica thought her words would shatter me, but what she didn't know was that wounds have a way of hardening into armor. The years of abandonment had burned me, yes, but they had also forged me into someone she could never comprehend. As she laughed, mocking me, my mind drifted back to the day David left me. He didn't even look me in the eyes when he said it. "You're too plain," he told me coldly, stuffing clothes into a suitcase. "I need a woman who fits the life I've built." And then he walked out, straight into Monica's waiting arms. She had stolen my husband, my stability, my place in society. But the will he left behind would prove one thing. Everything that looks stable isn't always built on solid ground. The lawyer's office smelled of polished wood and ink, the kind of scent that carried weight in history. On the desk sat a thick brown envelope, sealed with David's initials. Everyone's eyes kept flickering toward it, but Monica's especially. She sat upright, her back stiff, her painted lips curved in an eager smile. To her, the envelope was a treasure chest. To me, it was a storm waiting to be unleashed. "Shall we proceed?" the lawyer asked, glancing around. Monica quickly nodded, her voice dripping with impatience. Yes, please. Let's get this over with, so we can all go home." She shot me a look, the kind that said, "You'll soon see who the real nobody is." I wanted to laugh. If only she knew. If only she understood the depths of what David had left behind. I had kept my silence all through the insults, not because I was weak, but because timing is everything. Life teaches you that revenge doesn't need noise, it needs patience. I watched Monica preen in her chair, adjusting her jewelry, ready to bask in her imagined victory. I looked at the lawyer, who looked back at me briefly, his eyes carrying a flicker of something. Was it pity? Or was it the anticipation of what he was about to unleash? When the lawyer broke the seal and slid the papers out, the atmosphere thickened. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath. Monica leaned forward, her hand clutching her designer handbag like a trophy. The children looked on, wide-eyed. I folded my hands neatly on my lap, my face calm, though inside, my heart drummed with the rhythm of fate. The lawyer cleared his throat again and began to read. "This is the last will and testament of David Harrison." His voice echoed across the room, heavy with power. The silence that followed was thick enough to slice with a knife. David had always been a man of theatrics, even in death. He had left specific instructions that the will must be read in front of both families, old and new. It was his final stage, his last show, his way of playing puppeteer even from the grave. But what Monica never expected was that his script wasn't written in her favor. The lawyer paused, his eyes skimming over the words, then continued. "To my beloved children I leave," he listed amounts, shares and properties. Gasps filled the air as numbers rolled off his tongue. Monica's smile widened. She believed her name was next, her triumph seconds away. "And to my wife, Monica Harrison," the lawyer's voice slowed deliberately, almost as if savoring the moment. Monica sat taller, her chest puffed out, ready to receive her crown. The room leaned forward with her. "To my wife, Monica Harrison," the lawyer repeated, his tone suddenly sharper, "I leave only this note. Be careful how you treat people, for the wheel of life always turns." Monica's smile shattered, her face drained of color. A stunned silence gripped the room. And in that moment, I lifted my chin slightly, the ghost of a smile tugging at my lips. The room erupted into whispers, gasps, and even a muffled chuckle from the back row. Monica's head snapped toward the lawyer, her voice rising an octave. "What? That's it. That's all he left me." Her hands trembled as she clutched her handbag tighter, as though the bag itself could anchor her drowning pride. The lawyer calmly adjusted his glasses, unshaken by her outburst. "That's what the will states, ma'am." The veins in her neck bulged as she spat the words. "This must be a mistake. I am his wife. I deserve everything." But the lawyer only looked at her with the detached calm of a man who had seen too many families fall apart in this very office. I sat there, still as stone, but inside, I could feel the fire of satisfaction warming my bones. Years of humiliation, of Monica calling me names, of being dismissed as irrelevant, all of it had been building toward this moment. She had called me a nobody, but now it was her turn to taste the bitter pill of insignificance. She pounded her fist against the table. I was his wife. He loved me. But even her own voice faltered at the end, betraying her doubt. The irony was poetic. She had built her identity on his wealth, and in one stroke, that wealth had abandoned her. The lawyer cleared his throat again and shuffled the papers. "And now," he said, glancing briefly in my direction, "to my former wife, Evelyn Harrison," my name echoed in the room like thunder after a storm. Monica's eyes widened, her head snapping toward me as though she had just realized the ground beneath her feet was giving way. The silence was thick, all eyes burning into me. Even my own daughter, who had been sitting tensely beside me, reached for my hand. The lawyer continued, "To my former wife, Evelyn Harrison, who stood by me through the years of my rise and my fall, who bore my burdens, and who never once turned her back on me. I leave my company's shares, the mansion on Willow Creek, and my personal savings account." The gasp that followed was deafening. Monica's face turned the color of chalk, her lips trembling as though words had betrayed her. "No, no, no, no," she muttered, shaking her head violently. "This can't be right. This can't be happening." But it was. The lawyer's voice was steady, firm, undeniable. These are the instructions David Harrison left before his passing, and I am bound by law to execute them as written. Monica clutched her chest, leaning back in her chair as though she might faint even then. But her pride, that stubborn pride, kept her upright, her eyes darting around the room, looking for someone, anyone, to support her. But no one moved. I remembered her exact words not an hour before. "You are a nobody." The memory sliced through me again, but this time, instead of pain, it carried a strange kind of power. I turned my head slowly and met her eyes. For the first time, Monica saw me not as someone beneath her, but as the mountain she could never climb. Her lips quivered, her mascara smudging slightly under the heat of her panic. She whispered again, "This is not possible." But I remained silent. Sometimes, silence is the sweetest revenge. David had been many things in life. Charming, deceitful, ambitious, selfish, but he was not blind. Somewhere deep inside, he had known what Monica was, what she had done, and who she truly was beneath her flawless exterior. And in death, he had chosen to correct his mistakes. He had stripped her of the throne she thought was hers, and placed it back into the hands of the woman who had built it with him. Me. And the irony of it all wasn't lost on me. He had humiliated me in life, but in death, he had crowned me in front of everyone. Monica lurched forward, suddenly, slamming her hand on the table. "I will contest this will. Do you hear me? I will take this to court." Her shrill voice echoed off the walls, but the lawyer didn't even flinch. "You may do as you please," he said evenly, "but I should warn you." Mr. Harrison was very thorough. He left video recordings, bank statements, and signed documents with witnesses. "It will stand in court." Monica's mouth fell open, her eyes darting desperately around the room. Some of David's relatives hid their smirks behind their hands, while others openly shook their heads at her arrogance. That was when it happened, the moment that etched itself into everyone's memory. Monica's chest heaved as she tried to speak again, but nothing came out. Her face drained of color completely, her body swayed, and before anyone could move, she fainted. Collapsing right there in the lawyer's office, her body crumpled onto the pristine carpet with a heavy thud. Gasps and shouts filled the room. Someone rushed to her side. "Call 911, a relative cried. But I just sat there, still and composed, my daughter's hand gripping mine tightly. For years, she had insulted me, mocked me, called me nothing. Now she lay unconscious, stripped of everything she thought made her powerful. The lawyer paused, adjusting his glasses again, waiting for the commotion to settle. Paramedics were called, and Monica was carried out of the room, her limp figure reminding everyone that arrogance has a way of breaking even the strongest facade. The door closed behind her, and silence once again swallowed the room. All eyes turned back to me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like the abandoned woman David had left behind. I felt seen, respected. The lawyer cleared his throat and continued reading, his eyes lingering on me briefly before returning to the paper. "And finally," he read, his voice softer now, "to Evelyn Harrison, the woman I failed but never stopped admiring, I leave this letter." My breath caught in my chest. A letter? He had written me a letter? My hands trembled as the lawyer unfolded the final paper. The room leaned in, every ear desperate to hear what David could possibly have said to the woman he had publicly shamed. And as the words left the lawyer's lips, I felt a storm of emotions rise within me, pain, sorrow, relief, and something I had not expected at all, vindication. The lawyer unfolded the letter slowly, almost reverently, as if he knew the weight of the words he was about to release. His voice softened, but it carried the authority of truth. "To Evelyn," he read, "the woman who bore my shame, who carried my burdens, and who never asked for anything in return. I failed you, Evelyn. I broke your heart, and I allowed pride to blind me. But I never stopped remembering who was there in the nights when I had nothing, when the business was just an idea, when there was no money, no mansion, no empire." The lawyer's voice cracked slightly. A hush fell over the room so deep even breathing seemed too loud. I froze in my chair. My chest tightened as the words sank into me like drops of fire and rain all at once. For years, I had asked myself why. Why did David throw me away like I was nothing? Why did he exchange decades of loyalty for Monica's shallow beauty? And now, even in death, his confession cut me open anew. I betrayed you, the letter went on, because I thought success meant upgrading my life, my image, even my wife. But all I did was trade diamonds for stones. And Monica, the lawyer hesitated but continued firmly. Monica gave me companionship, yes, but it was hollow. She wanted my name, my money, my empire, not me. And I was too blinded to see it. Gasps swept through the room. Relatives looked at each other wide-eyed. Some even shook their heads in disbelief, as if hearing the ghost of David himself confess from beyond the grave. My daughter squeezed my hand tightly, her nails digging into my palm as tears slipped from her eyes. Monica's absence from the room made the moment even heavier. She had fainted before hearing the very words that might have destroyed her pride entirely. For once, I didn't feel like the wounded woman left behind. I felt like the truth itself had risen, like a lion that could no longer be caged. The lawyer's voice trembled slightly as he continued. Evelyn, I know you may never forgive me, but I wanted you to know this. Everything I built was because of you. You encouraged me when no one else did. You believed in me when I doubted myself. Every contract, every business deal, every brick in our home, your fingerprints were there. And when I left, I carried all of that with me, though I was too proud to admit it. The empire I gave to Monica was never truly hers. It was always ours, yours and mine. A tear slid down my cheek. I quickly brushed it away, unwilling to let anyone see me falter in that moment. The words in the letter were like a knife and a bomb at the same time. They reopened wounds I had thought were scarred over, but they also soothed something deep within me, a longing for recognition, for truth. He had humiliated me in life, but now he was honoring me in death. I didn't know whether to weep or to laugh at the irony. My mind drifted back to the nights I had stayed up sewing his torn shirts because he couldn't afford new ones, to the mornings when I had taken extra shifts at the diner just so we could pay rent, and to the years when I watched him grow into a man the world admired, even as he grew distant from me. The lawyer paused, and for a moment, it felt as if the entire room was breathing through him. Then he read the final lines. This letter is not to ease my guilt. It is too heavy to erase. It is not to ask for your love. I forfeited that long ago. It is simply to acknowledge the truth. You were never a nobody. You were always the foundation. And in death, I can only hope the world sees what I was too blind to recognize while alive. Silence swallowed the office. No one dared to move. The words hovered in the air, heavy, unshakable, undeniable. I closed my eyes briefly, swallowing hard. 4 years. Monica had built her arrogance on the lie that she had won, that she had taken everything that mattered. She had mocked me, sneered at me, told me to my face that I was nobody. But the will, the letter, the confession, it had all stripped her victory bare. And even though she wasn't conscious to hear it, the entire family, the lawyer, my children, and everyone present had heard the truth. And that truth could never be erased. A relative from David's side broke the silence first, clearing his throat awkwardly. Well, I suppose the man finally saw reason, he muttered, his eyes darting toward me with a mixture of pity and respect. Another chimed in. Evelyn, you were always the one who stood by him. We all knew it. We just didn't say anything. Their words came reluctantly, as if dragged out by guilt. But I didn't need their validation anymore. David's own words had spoken louder than anything they could ever admit. For once, the tables had turned. The lawyer folded the letter carefully and slid it across the desk toward me. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It wasn't just a letter. It was a symbol, a monument of truth. The paper was warm from his hands, and yet it felt cold, heavy, soaked with regret. I tucked it carefully into my purse, not because I needed proof of what David had said, but because it was a piece of history I could one day show my grandchildren. The story of how their grandmother was mocked, discarded, and forgotten, but vindicated in the end. Then, just as I thought the storm was calming, the lawyer cleared his throat once more. "There is one more matter," he said, his voice oddly cautious. All eyes swung back to him, and my heart skipped a beat. One more matter. The envelope looked empty, but he reached under the desk and pulled out a smaller sealed folder. Mr. Harrison left behind a private confession regarding his estate, and it concerns not just Evelyn, but Monica as well. The room stiffened. My blood ran cold. A confession. Even after all this, David still had one final twist to reveal. The lawyer tapped the smaller sealed folder against the desk, his fingers steady but his eyes betraying the gravity of what was inside. The air in the room thickened again, as though everyone could sense that this wasn't over, that David had saved the sharpest blade for last. My palms grew damp, my breath uneven. This document, the lawyer began, was marked private and confidential. Mr. Harrison instructed that it be read only after his official will and letter. He carefully slit the seal, the sound of tearing paper louder than thunder in that silence. All eyes followed his every move, some leaning forward, others clutching the armrests of their chairs like passengers on a turbulent plane. He unfolded the document and read, "To all my family, to Evelyn, and yes, even to Monica, there are truths I buried in life that must now come to light in death. I built my empire on ambition, but also on lies. And the greatest lie was not who I loved, but who I trusted." Murmurs rippled through the room. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and continued, his voice weighted. "There is money, vast amounts, hidden outside the estate, siphoned through companies I created to cover my mistakes. And one person knew about it. The pause was long, deliberate. That person was Monica." Gasps tore through the office like a wave crashing against rocks. My jaw tightened, though I was not surprised. Deep down, I had always suspected that Monica's obsession with David had little to do with love. She had hovered over every deal, every account, every public appearance, like a vulture circling its prey. She blackmailed me. The letter went on. She threatened to expose my financial dealings if I ever left her. And though I left Evelyn, though I broke her, I could never leave Monica, because she held a gun to my empire. The lawyer's voice shook as he read those words, and the room erupted into chaos. Relatives muttered in disbelief, some whispering Monica's name with venom, others shaking their heads as though their entire image of David had crumbled. My daughter squeezed my hand tighter, her nails cutting deeper into my skin, but I didn't mind. My eyes blurred with tears, not of sorrow, but of vindication. The woman who had called me a nobody had, all along, been nothing more than a blackmailer. Her empire of arrogance was built not on power, not on love, but on blackmail and lies. The lawyer raised his hand to quiet the room and pressed on. "And so, I made a decision before my death. The hidden accounts Monica believed would one day be hers, they are not." His voice grew firmer. "They have been frozen, redirected, all of them, and the beneficiary of those accounts is Evelyn." For a moment, the world tilted. I sat there, frozen, unable to comprehend. The accounts, the hidden wealth, billions that Monica had schemed and lied for, gone from her grasp and handed to me. The room erupted again, louder this time, like a courtroom gasping after a shocking verdict. Aunt Margaret, David's elder sister, muttered aloud, "Oh, Lord!" So all this time, her eyes widened as she stared at me, as though seeing me for the first time. Others murmured, their words tumbling over each other. She blackmailed him? All that money gone to Evelyn? What will Monica do when she wakes up? The room had shifted. I was no longer the quiet, insulted ex-wife sitting meekly in the corner. I was the storm. I was the reckoning. My heart pounded as the lawyer continued. David's confession goes on to say, "I wanted Monica to know that power gained through manipulation will always crumble. And I wanted Evelyn to finally have the dignity, the honor, and the freedom she was always owed. This estate, my shares, my hidden wealth, it belongs to her. Let the world know who truly stood by me." At that, my lips parted, trembling, but no words came. Tears streamed freely down my face now, though I lifted my chin high, refusing to bow even as the floodgates of emotion opened within me. It was then the doors to the lawyer's office burst open. 2 paramedics stood there, holding Monica upright between them. She had regained consciousness, her face pale, her eyes wild with confusion. What did I miss?" she croaked, her voice hoarse, her hair disheveled. Every head in the room turned toward her. The silence was deafening. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harrison, we have just finished reading the confession." Monica blinked, her lips trembling. "Confession? What confession?" The lawyer looked directly at her and repeated David's words. "He confessed that you blackmailed him, Monica, that you threatened him with his own financial secrets. And as a result, he stripped you of everything. The hidden accounts you thought you controlled are gone. They belong to Evelyn now." For a moment, Monica simply stared, her face slack, her body swaying. "No, no, no!" she screamed, jerking away from the paramedics. "This is a lie. This is not true." But the letter sat there on the desk, undeniable, permanent, her name inked forever in betrayal. She lunged toward the desk, her trembling hands reaching for the papers, but David's brother intercepted her, his voice sharp. "Monica, stop embarrassing yourself. The truth is here. We all heard it. You built your kingdom on lies, and now it has crumbled." Monica collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. The woman who once called me a nobody was broken before my eyes. And as I sat there, watching her unravel, I realized that revenge had never tasted so bittersweet. The room was a storm of whispers, arguments, and tears. Monica's sobs pierced through the silence like broken glass. She clutched at her pearls, as though they could save her from drowning in shame. But nothing could erase the truth written in David's hand, stamped with his seal, spoken through the lawyer's lips. For years, she had built her throne on my pain. She had called me a nobody, dismissed me like dust. But now, she was the one stripped bare, reduced to nothing but a name forever tied to deceit. I sat back in my chair, my daughter's hand still gripping mine. Her eyes were wet with pride, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Mama, he gave it all back to you." I nodded slowly, my own chest tight, my emotions twisting between satisfaction and sorrow. Yes, he had given it all back. But it was not enough to undo the years I had cried myself to sleep, the years of watching Monica parade herself in the wealth I had helped build. But it was something. It was dignity restored. It was justice, late but powerful. Monica lifted her tear-streaked face toward me, her eyes bloodshot, her voice breaking. You did this. You poisoned him against me." I tilted my head, studying her. For a moment, I almost pitied her, but then I remembered every insult, every sneer, every cruel word. I remembered her laughter when she told me I was nobody. My lips curved into a faint, steady smile. "No, Monica," I said quietly, my voice carrying like thunder despite its calm. "You did this to yourself. David only wrote the truth." She screamed, a wild, broken sound that echoed off the polished walls of the lawyer's office. "It's not fair! It's not fair!" she cried, her fists pounding against the table. But fairness had nothing to do with it. Life has a way of balancing its own scales, and the wheel always turns. Today, it had turned in my favor. The lawyer leaned forward, his voice cool and firm. "The court will uphold this will. It is ironclad. Nothing you do will change that." Monica collapsed back into her chair, her sobs softer now, like the whimper of someone who finally understood defeat. The lawyer gathered the papers into a neat pile and stood. "That concludes the reading of the will," he said firmly. "Mrs. Evelyn Harrison, you are now the legal owner of the Harrison estate, the mansion, the company's shares, and the redirected accounts." The words struck like a drumbeat of finality. Gasps rippled once more. My daughter squeezed my hand tighter, whispering, "Mama, it's all yours now." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe deeply, the air filling my lungs like freedom. As the relatives filed out of the room, some approached me with hesitant smiles, others with nods of respect. I could see the shift in their eyes. They no longer looked at me as the discarded wife, the woman left behind. They looked at me as the matriarch, the rightful heir, the woman who had endured and risen. But I did not revel in their validation. I had learned long ago not to measure my worth by the approval of others. My worth had been mine all along, hidden beneath years of sorrow. Now, it had simply been uncovered. Monica remained slumped in her chair, her mascara smudged, her lips trembling. She looked smaller somehow, like a child stripped of her toys. I walked past her slowly, my heels clicking against the marble floor, every step echoing like a drum of triumph. I paused briefly beside her, not out of malice, but out of finality. I leaned just close enough for her to hear me. "Next time you call someone a nobody," I whispered. "Remember this moment." Her shoulders shook harder, her sobs muffled. I straightened and walked on, my head held high. Outside, the air of the city hit me like a cleansing wind. The skyscrapers of New York loomed overhead, their steel and glass glittering in the sunlight. People bustled on the sidewalks, unaware of the battle that had just been fought and won behind those office doors. I inhaled deeply, the scent of car exhaust and hot pretzels, strangely comforting. For the first time in decades, I felt light. My daughter walked beside me, her arm linked with mine. "Mama," she said softly, "he finally saw you. The world finally sees you." Tears welled in my eyes, but this time they were not tears of pain. They were tears of release, of triumph, of a heart finally exhaling after years of holding its breath. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking but strong. "He saw me. And now, so will everyone else." I looked up at the sky, the sunlight warming my face, and for a fleeting moment, I imagined David watching from somewhere far beyond. I didn't forgive him, not fully, but I accepted the truth he had left behind. And that was enough. That night, I stood in the grand foyer of the Willow Creek mansion, the house that had once been mine, stolen and now returned. The chandeliers glittered like stars, the marble floors gleamed, and the silence of the empty rooms felt like an embrace. I placed my hand on the banister, whispering to myself, "Nobody? No, I was always somebody." My voice echoed through the halls like a proclamation. And as I walked further into the mansion, my steps steady, my heart unshaken, I knew this truth. Revenge was never mine to take. Life had delivered it on its own. And oh, how sweet it was to taste. And there, my beautiful people, was my story. If it moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear it.